Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry that I have to move my lecture to tutorial session, so I'm taking basically your slot for the tutorial because yesterday was a holiday, and then we're supposed to have the second drop-in sessions. Okay. Now everything that has been given is already in the canvas already, and then you basically are given an access to the pre-recording as well. So in the pre-recording, I basically explain everything related with derivations, and I show you through the direct. So I will not repeat that thing again, but rather in these drop-in sessions, we will try to reiterate on some of the understandings that you probably will get better if I sessions and the drop sessions intention is to get more close, isolated with this. The mission of the drop is basically to accept that if you want to play that thing, so you don't have to basically fix into any place, right? Now, okay, Evangeline, or I'm still laggy? Or probably the connections in your side. Hello, Gladys, how are you doing this afternoon? Are you okay? So sometimes the connections in my side are not good as well. My sound carried through your side good. How are you feeling this afternoon? Good, huh? Okay. Hello, Saif. How are you doing, Saif? Are you doing okay? All good, Saif? I heard the KPT would like to start the face-to-face class session soon. Okay, so I hope you can take care, Saif, so probably get a bit of rest. Sarina, how are you doing this afternoon, Sarina? All good? Right. Okay, so in the previous drop-in session, we have discussed the flow of falling film, basically, and we have derived the everything from the first principles, from the postulations, and then as we go through the shear stress derivations, and then through the velocity profile distributions, and then we go and follow with the average velocity, and then also we express the average velocity in terms of the maximum velocity, okay, and then we also get the force that is applied on the solid surface. Now, the previous example, it's mainly used to illustrate the use of the gravity forces and the role of gravity forces and the use of Cartesian coordinates. As we have mentioned before, there is three possibility of the coordinates that you need to be familiarized in use. You can use Cartesian coordinates, or you can use a cylindrical coordinates and the spherical coordinates. So you use this coordinate, it depending on the coordinates of your system. So if that has the shape that can be described easily in terms of the x, y, and z direction, for example, then you will use a Cartesian coordinate. So for example, for the flow of a falling film, then you will stick with the Cartesian coordinates. Now, if your flow or your system basically has something that can be described better using a cylindrical coordinates, then you will stick with the cylindrical coordinates. So for example, if the flow is through a circular tube, for example, or through an annulus, for example, which is the next example that we will discuss after this, then we will use the cylindrical coordinates. Okay, and if we want to use something like a flow around a ball, for example, or a sphere, then what you can do essentially is doing you solve it in terms of the spherical coordinates. Hi, good afternoon, Stephanie. How are you doing? Are you doing okay, Stephanie? I just see that you are coming in just
Yeah,
now.
I'm doing fine.
Okay, thank you for replying, Stephanie. So these three are the things that you need to go back again and check. This is given in the week 2 slides, the cylindrical, spherical, and the Cartesian coordinates. Okay, so we use this formula on the appendix B that describes the generalized Newton law of viscosity for Cartesian, cylindrical, and spherical coordinates. Now, in this week 3 example, we are talking about the flow of through a circular tube. So the flow of fluid in circular tube is something that chemical engineers deals a lot in our job, basically. So if we encounter this frequently in a lot of things, like in the design or something like that. So for this particular problem, it's basically the same, that we just use the cylindrical coordinates. Now, the first thing that we need to have is a mental picture of your system. So we need to draw first your system. Now, the transfer phenomena is dealing with the microscopic balances. So meaning that we are talking about the shell element balances, right? So the shell elements that we are taking in here have a shape of the fluid that is flowing through the tube. Now, the fluid is flowing in the directions of going down the tube. So we take as an original coordinates of 0, 0 at this particular point. Okay, so we assume that we can take at this particular point 0, 0, 0, and we neglect the NFX. The NFX meaning that we don't we assume that there is no disturbance. Okay, from that particular point up to this length. So we are basically focusing ourselves on the length of the cylindrical with the length of L from 0 to L. Now, we have two coordinates. One is Z, that is going down. The other one is on the radial directions. If we go back into the slides again, we have a three normal conditions, boundary conditions that we use for momentum transport. Okay, the first condition is at solid fluid interfaces. If we have an interface between the solid and the fluid, then at the particular interface, then the fluid velocity will be equal to the velocity of the solid. So if the solid does not move, then the velocity of the liquid will be 0. Okay, at liquid interfacial, then you have basically the velocity will be continuous on the particular interface, and also the shear stress will be continuous. At the liquid gas interfacial plane, at liquid gas interface, on the other hand, the shear stress can be assumed to be equal to 0 on the assumption if we met the conditions that the viscosity of the gas is much lower than the viscosity of the liquids. Okay, and then we have applied these things in here. We have applied the first the boundary conditions on top in here in the interface of the liquid with the gas, and then we have also applied the boundary conditions for the liquid with the solid. So the one on the bottom, we assume that the velocity at this particular interface will be 0. On the other hand, on the top in here, the shear stress will be 0. Okay, now we need to go into the postulations of this example 2, flow through a circular tube. So the postulation that we take in here is that we have a steady state laminar flow of fluids of a constant density rho and viscosity mu in a vertical tube of length L and radius R. The liquid flows downward under the influence of pressure difference and gravity. If you don't have a pressure gradient or a pressure difference, then you will not have any flow. Okay, because in order for you to transport a liquid or a fluid from one position to the other position, then you need to have a difference in pressure. Okay, that chemical engineer will understand this principle better. Now, We also assume that the tube length is substantially larger relative to the tube radius so that the NFX can be neglected. Okay. So we make a mental picture that the fluid is going from the top into the bottom direction. And then the start of our system of interest is at this particular point, okay, where this is the center line of this particular cylinder. Now, when we talk about the boundary conditions and when the fluid is going down in here, we expect that there will be a velocity difference at this particular point with the one that is touching the tube. Why? Because of the boundary conditions that we are given. Because the velocity of the liquid in the interface between the liquid and the solid will be equal to the velocity with which solid surface is moving. So at this particular point, we don't, in the system, we don't say anything in here. We just tell that this is a stationary tube. So meaning the tube does not move. So the velocity of the liquid just in this tube surface will be equal to 0. But of course, we are not sure what is the velocity on the center line, what is the velocity in here, what is the velocity in here, what is the velocity in here. So we can have a mental assumptions that basically the velocity will be changing as a functions of radius. Okay, and what else that we know? Because the velocity is the fluid is going down, meaning that the velocity in the z direction is not 0. So that velocity will have some value. So that velocity is also a function of the radius. Like I told you again, this velocity of in the z direction is a function of radius because by the mental picture we talk about the boundary condition, then the velocity at this particular point is 0. But of course, the velocity cannot be 0 in here because if the velocity is 0 in here, that means there is no flow, right? You agree with me? So I'm just trying to tell you, because sometimes it may be difficult for you to understand why did we take the postulation in the way it is. Okay, and then the velocity in the radius direction. So the velocity as that is going in the direction. Of course, we don't have that velocity in that direction, right? We don't have, because all the velocity is only in the going down direction. Okay, and then we also don't have a velocity in the angular direction. Angular direction meaning this the one in the angular direction. So we have like a circular movement, something like that. We don't have, basically. We don't have a rip or a curl move, basically. So we don't have. So this one is 0, right? And then the pressure is a function of z. Why? Because if there is no difference in the pressure at this particular position and this particular position, then there will be no flow. So the pressure will be a function of z, and that will be a logical assumption. Now, we are taking the shell elements of this fluid with a thickness of delta r. Why is that? Because we assume that the velocity in the z direction is a function of r. So the shell elements of the fluid have to be taken with the thickness of delta r, because the property will vary in r direction. So that's why we are taking the shell elements in the thickness in the directions where it will vary. Okay, and the thickness you take it as a function of that particular coordinate where the property change. Okay, up to this point, I think everybody clear or not? I'm trying to be very slow. The derivations I don't really care, but what is important in here is the main concept that you need to get, because transport phenomena can be quite tricky. So you will come back again and then you ask me, why is it like this? Why is it like that? Okay, so if I assume that the velocity is also vary in the z directions, meaning I will have a complex shell elements with the thickness of delta z and delta r. Okay, you agree with me? So up to this point, I don't want it. I just want to make it very simple. So I just want to make it an ideal case where the velocity in this direction is only a function of r. Okay, so once we have this postulation in here, This is the thing that are important for you to note. And then also in your assignment, you also need to start with this postulation again. And the postulation that you have will in your assignment should be quite similar with the postulation that we have in here, but you need to realize where you take the coordinates, because the way that you take the coordinate is very important. Okay, so the gravity directions will be going down. Okay, if you put the coordinates is going up, for example, from this side, then it will be against the gravity direction. Then it will have an implications to the way that you put in to the sign of your gravity force in your momentum balance. Okay, now once you get this thing, the first thing that you need to do is you go back into your general Newton law of viscosity. You try to decipher which component of the shear stress exists within your system. So you go through the detail of this Newton's law of viscosity in the cylindrical coordinates. Now, as you go through here, you know that the VR is 0. So this will be 0. And then we are dealing with the liquid. Okay, so in liquid is incompressible. So what means by the incompressible is if you increase the pressure for a liquid, then the density will not change by much. That is the definitions of the incompressible fluid. Okay, and then the second so this will basically become 0. The second component is a T, basically a T of this one. The angular velocity will be 0 because it's 0, so this component will be 0. The VR is also 0. This one is 0, so this one is 0. Okay. The Vz as well. Vz exists, but Vz is not a function of Z. So essentially, with respect to Z, then Vz will be a constant. So a derivative of a constant is 0. Okay, and then this one is 0. So this one is also, you continue again, this V in the angular velocity is 0. This one is also 0, so it becomes 0. Okay, and then this one also the same. The only component that exists is only shear stress in the shear stress, or I can say this one is a tensor with R and Z, basically. The first one will be 0, the second one will not be 0. Okay, now the way that we put in these things has an implication. So the directions of your momentum transport is generally denoted by the second subscript in here. So this one is denoting the directions of the momentum. The first one is normally the directions of your momentum transport. So in this particular case, you stick with the second, instead with this one, you stick with the second one in here. Okay, as we discussed before in our last week drop-in session and also in our pre-recording lecture. So it's very important that you go and stick with this. So after you put in everything, you prove that you only have this particular shear stress component that exists in this particular scenario. So up to this point, I hope everything is very clear. Okay, now you go and draw your, go to your system again. You have this particular component that is working in this particular things. This is a so-called combined momentum flux. Okay, there is a combined momentum flux that is working at the position of Z equals 0. There is another one that is working on the plane that Z equal L, and then you have something that goes in from this particular side, and then something that goes out from that particular side. Okay, because you have basically 1, 2, 3, and then 4 of the surface. So you split these things in half, and then we are giving you an idea of what actually the combined momentum flux that is working. So we go and inspect where the surface area that is working. So for this pi z at z equals 0, we are dealing with this particular surface area in here. Okay, this particular surface area will be equal to 2 pi r delta r. Okay, and that's the same with z equal L as well. Now, for this combined momentum flux for this RZ direction is working along this particular area. Okay, or something that I can define with this 2 pi r multiplied by L. So if you have this this particular pencil, or I can put in something that is cylindrical in here. Okay, It's basically the surface area of this particular cylinder. Okay, this particular cylinder area in here. Okay, the circumference multiplied by the length. So that is the surface area where this combined momentum flux RZ working on. So that's very important for you to understand. So once you get that thing, then we also have another term that we need to include, that will be the gravity force in the z directions. Okay, that will be the whole volume of your shell element in here. The whole volume will be 2 pi r delta r L. So you know that this particular term that I put in the brackets will have a unit of meter cube, because the gravity is the gravity, and because of the rho in here, the rho in here is basically a density in here. Okay, so that's something that is different. So in here we are talking about the surface. This is a surface. This is a surface. But this one is we are talking about the volume. Okay, and then I sort of giving you a derivations in here of why we can take the surface area in here to be equal to 2 pi r delta r. Then you can go and look back in here. If you don't get it, I hope you get this one. So I'm only interested with this one because the second term in here will be much smaller. Now you put into the momentum balance, and note that the gravity force acting on the system in here has a sign of plus, because the direction of the flow is in the direction of the gravity. Gravity is always going down, so the sign is plus. Once we put in everything in here, then we can deconvolute, or we can break down the contributing terms for this combined momentum flux Z and combined momentum flux RZ. Now, a fine thing that you need to understand in here is that this R cannot be separated with this combined momentum flux. That's why, unlike the R in here that can be separated with this ZZ, this one in here cannot be separated with this component in here, because this combined momentum flux in here consisting of this component tau RZ. Okay, and then this tau RZ in here have this delta VR over, have this delta VZ over their R that may be a functions of R. So whenever you have something that is the functions of that particular independent variable, you cannot just separate them. They have to stick together, or otherwise you will make a mistake when you process these things later on. So this is very important. Okay, very important that you need to look back into your things, into your form, and then you need to make sure that you don't just split out this R in here. Now, this pi ZZ in here can be split into 3 components: pressure, tau ZZ, and then rho VZ, rho VZ. Because the pressure exists in here because the first subscript is equal to the second subscript. Like I tell you in the previous lecture, that pressure is only working on the normally. So it has to be perpendicular to the exposed surface, and that perpendicular to the exposed surface will always be met when the first subscript is equal to the second subscript. Okay. So once you get this thing, then you can break down in here, and then this component in here on the other hand can also be break down into this tau RZ and VR VZ. But because there is the first subscript is different with the second subscript, meaning that you don't have the pressure component. All of that you can go back into your week 2 slides. I will not go in detail again because I have keep reiterating this in my previous lecture, and it's very important that you understand this fact, because otherwise you can always inspect that thing. You can always go back into your slides or the bird book, but you yourself need to understand why is it the case like that. So that's why understanding is very important. Now, we want to break down again. So this tau ZZ, like what you derive in here, this will be equal to 0. So this will be 0, this will be 0, right? And then the P at Z equal 0, we can assume that this is P naught. And then the P at Z equal L is equal PL, right? So this one is 0, this one is 0, and then this component will be 0 because the VR is 0. This component will be 0 as well. Now, once you get all these things, you can simplify into this particular line in here. And then this will be same with this one. Okay, because this Vz is not a function of z. Vz is not a function of z. So this will be, this term in here will equal to this term in here. So this will cancel each other. As a result, you only have this, you only have this, and then you only have this term in here and this term in here. Then we can do mathematical manipulations to basically we define another term called a modified pressure. So this modified pressure in here will be equal to the pressure minus rho g z. Okay, so this one is called the modified pressure. Okay, in this particular problem, normally the modified pressure is defined as pressure plus rho gh, where the h has a distance upward. Okay, so normally we take, in that particular scenario where we take the modified pressure according to this definition, the original coordinate will be in this particular direction. Okay, because when you define a depth, then the depth is measured with respect to the particular points at this particular position. So in this particular scenario, we will have a negative sign because it's against the way that normally the modified pressure is defined. Okay, so once we get these things, once we put in here and we scrap this one with this one, we will be able to define this term in here and this term in here into this term in here. Okay, once we get this term in here, we know that this one can be defined as equal to the P naught, and this one will be equal to the PL. Okay, then as you can see in here that this R cannot be separated with the shear stress RZ, and then the second term also cannot be separated. Okay, and if I want to be detailed, then I need to put in brackets in here. Okay, I need to put in a bracket in here. But when I make this note in here, I was in rush because I think that was the first year that I'm teaching transport phenomena. Okay, so this actually needs to be put in the brackets. So once you get these things in here, then you divide by 2 pi r delta RL. Okay, when you divide by this 2 pi r delta RL, you cannot directly scrap this R in here and this R in here against this one, because this tau RZ in here is a functions of R. So meaning that they have to be inspected to get all together. So that's why I put R in here. I just leave it intact in here. Okay, and then I move it back into the right hand side in here. Okay, so this is very important because if you basically overlook this dependence of this tau RZ with respect to R, and then you just cancel out this R, then you will not get the correct answer. Okay, so up to this particular point, then we can take the limit delta R equal to 0. Then you will end up with your first order ordinary differential equations in here that you can integrate. Okay, once you integrate in here, then you get this particular, your shear stress is equal to the P naught minus P naught minus PL divided by 2L R plus C1 divided by R. Okay, now how do we get this particular constant in here? So, transport phenomena is mostly a mathematical subject, but the things that connects the mathematical form with the physical sense, with the physical situation, is the boundary condition. So if everything that has a mathematical form will be useless if that does not explain the real system. So that's why we are using a boundary conditions. Okay, so now we know that even though this boundary condition that we define in here is not explained, this comes from the logical or from the common sense. So when we inspected the systems, when we are taking at the position at R equals 0 or at the center line, okay, at this particularly the center line position, then the shear stress cannot be infinite. Okay, you agree with me, because anything in real situation cannot be infinite. So nobody can have an infinite amount of money, nobody can have an infinite amount of time. Everything has to be finite. So at that particular central line, then the shear stress has to have a particular value. Okay, so this will not be possible if this C1 is having a value, because if you put in R equals 0, then anything that is divided by 0 will be infinite. So that means, by the logical common sense, we know that it's not possible. That means that C1 should be equal to 0 in order for us to have a shear stress that have a particular value that is finite at R equal 0. So then your tau RZ in here will be equal to the P0 minus PL divided by 2L. And that will be basically a linear functions of R. Okay. Then you go back again into your system, you can draw that thing, then you know that your shear stress at the center line will be equal to 0, and then that will go linearly to the outside. As it goes up, the radius increase, and then reaching the maximum at R equal R. Then it will become maximum your shear stress at the tube radius. So that will be equal to the P0 minus PL R divided by 2L. Now, once you get the shear stress, then you can go back into your Newton's law of viscosity in order for you to get your velocity profile of Z as a functions of R. Okay, so you do it back, you substitute this term with this one, then you integrate. Now, once you get the velocity in here, then you have another boundary condition. Your boundary condition is the boundary conditions at R equal the tube radius. So that at that particular positions, then your velocity should be equal to 0 because your tube does not move. Okay, so you put it in. Now you plug in your Vz equals 0. You plug in your R equal to R in order for you to be able to get your C2. Once you get your C2, then now you know that your Vz is basically a parabolic function in terms of the R. Okay, so if you draw your velocity profile, you know that it is 0 at the at R equal R, or at the positions where your liquid is touching your tube ready, your tube wall. Okay, it becomes maximum in the center. Okay, there is a correlation between this Vz and the tau Rz, because like I told you again, the tau Rz is 0 at the center line, meaning that your dVz over dr is 0 at this particular position. Okay, and then at the particular positions where your derivative is 0, then your velocity in the z direction will have a maximum value. Okay, I cannot say that this is a general case, so you have to see how your function vary, but in here it basically implies that there is a connections between your Vz and your shear stress, because your shear stress is basically the derivative of the velocity in the z direction. Now, up to this point, everything is clear? Is there any questions, Stephanie, Tiara, Alvin, Jonathan, Kusal, Daniel, Gladys, Saif, Sarina? Okay, yeah, all is good, yeah. I just go through. I did not go into the mathematical things, but I just go into the concept, so you guys know, and you don't have a doubt in transfer phenomena, basically. So I'm going to the bottom of everything to make it clear. Now, you know that the maximum velocity is, once you draw these things, then you know that the velocity profile is maximum at the center line. That will be equal to this value in here. Now, we are interested to find the average velocity profile. So, how did you find this thing? So, basically, great. Now you know that the velocity is going down these directions, right? So you have to integrate it over the surface area of this cylindrical tube. Okay, that surface area will be perpendicular to the direction of your flow. Okay, that's why the integration is made in terms of these things: 0 to 2 pi, 0 to r, vz r dr d phi. Then you may ask me, why, sir, integration is having this kind of form in here? Then you need to go back into your canvas. Let me open it in here for you so that you know. Okay, I think I have given that thing in your canvas, but let me give some time to show it to you again. Okay, so that you guys don't have a doubt on that I have given everything in my transfer phenomena. Okay, so let me go in here, and then I go to your view basically. Yep, and then I go to your module. So that one is supposed to be on the week 2 introductions, if I'm not wrong. Okay, you want to get into your these things in here. Okay, this one into the volume element. Okay, the polar coordinates, the cylindrical polar coordinates, so spherical polar coordinates. Okay, so that one is, if you are talking about the volume element, that's one how you integrate, and then you want to go and check this one as well, the coordinate system review, that I give you coordinate systems in here. Okay, so for the cylindrical system, that will be described by something like this: the volume in here, the volume in here. Okay, and then the volume is in here, and then this is everything that you need to find in here. Okay, you check in here. So for cylindrical coordinates, and for the particular quantity that you want to integrate in here, okay, then you have to integrate in terms of the r, dr, and d phi. So we don't use a dz because we are not interested with the volume element, but rather we use the integration over the total section area. So we integrate this from 0 to 2 pi, 0 to r, for the vz r dr d phi. Okay, so this, if you integrate these integrations in here, will be equal to the total surface area of your tube that has a perpendicular direction with respect to your volume, with respect to your flow. Okay, so that's very important. Now, the vz in here is only a function of r, so meaning that you can split the integral in terms of the d phi and then in terms of the dr, so they will be different. Okay, and then there is no connections between the r and then the angle as well in here, so you can split this into these terms in here, and then as you go and you do the derivations carefully, now you need to try to repeat again these things again in here. I would suggest that with the transfer phenomena problem, every time you always repeat your derivation, because when you do it on the test day, for the take-home test 1 and take-home test 2, if you don't get used to derivations, okay, you just look at it and you think that it's you think that it's all good. It's different with when you have a pencil and a paper and you do it really by hand. That makes a difference. Okay, once you go and continue that things, then you know that your vz is basically equal to this term in here. Then you can connect your average velocity with the maximum velocity. Then you find that your average velocity is equal to the half of the maximum velocity for the flow through a circular tube. And this is different with the flow through of a falling film. We know last week that the average velocity for a flow of a falling film is 2/3 of the maximum velocity for the flow of a falling film. Okay, so a different geometry will have a different connections between the average velocity and the velocity and the maximum velocity. So that this is why transfer phenomena is a strong way for you to find connections, because you go into the microscopic view and check the systems basically to understand what when you go and look deeper into your systems, then you have a much stronger, a much more detailed perspective of your system. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is the mass rate of flow. So it's everything is the same, but you need to know that it's only the only difference is only the density, because the density is having a unit of the gram per volume. Now you know in here that basically this one will have what is the unit for this part particular things is supposed to be meter per second. And then we need to check that this one supposed to have, this will be in terms of the, I think this will be in the meter square, and then this one is a meter square. So we need to always look back into the unit consistency as well. So if for this mass rate of flow, then of course the unit has to be in terms of the gram per unit time, or mass per unit time. Okay. Now, when we do a mass rate of flow, we know that we get a recover a particular form. Then this mass rate of flow is a familiar form that has been used for by chemical engineers for many times, for a long time already. This has been established a long time ago. It's called the Hagen-Poiseuille equation. Okay, so we know that the mass rate of flow is a linear functions with respect to the, is basically proportional to the pressure difference, and that it's radius raised to 4, the density, the pi, and is inversely proportional to the viscosity and the length of your cylinder. Then we need to go back again and check this Hagen-Poiseuille equation comes out from our assumption in here. Okay, so in the beginning we have defined an assumptions, okay, in here. So that's where the Hagen-Poiseuille equation will be valid, because when we derive this Hagen-Poiseuille equation, we use a particular assumptions in here. So that means the Hagen-Poiseuille equation is only valid for when these assumptions valid. If not, then this particular equation will not be valid. Okay. Besides doing this double integration, you can also you can also derive this Hagen-Poiseuille equation by multiplying the product of the cross-sectional area, the density, and the average velocity. That will be another way. Now, after you derive so far, then you may ask me, why, sir, that we are doing this transfer phenomena? Because by doing the transfer phenomena, you can get this Hagen-Poiseuille equation. Then you will ask me again, why Hagen-Poiseuille equation is important? Because sometimes you want to know the value of your viscosity, and then you want to know the value of your viscosity. Then how did you get the value of the viscosity? So you can design an equipment where basically it will give you the mass rate of the flow, and then you will be able to also measure the pressure difference in your system, and then you from the other data book you will be able to get the density, and then also from the measurement of your systems you will be able to get the radius. Okay, if everything can be measured in your system, then you will be able to get the viscosity for the particular fluid or the particular chemical. So that's how chemical engineers do their measurement. So they want to be able to get the viscosity, then they design an experiment, they design a system that will give them whatever the variables that they can get from the system and the experimental design, and then that will give them this viscosity. This viscosity is a characteristic of a material that also depends on the temperature and the pressure. But of course, sometimes in the data book, you may not be able to get the value of the viscosity for every materials, especially if you go out there as a chemical engineer, you want to design something for a new chemical component where a data handbook does not give you something, then this particular Hagen-Poiseuille equation will be able to tell you how you can get the viscosity for that particular new chemical. Okay, so that is very important, because I've been teaching transfer phenomena for like 4 years in a row, and then people will keep on asking me why transfer phenomena is important. This subject is very dry. Many people said that they are struggling with the mathematical, but otherwise a chemical engineer or Bert Stewart and Lightfoot will not invent that book and make your life suffer if this transfer phenomena is not for a reason, right? So I hope that you understand up to this point. Then the last quantity that we want to discuss is the Z component of the force. Is that on the fluid on the wetted surface area of the pipe. So what basically you want to get is what are the total force that is applied by the fluid on the tube surface. Okay, so you want to integrate that force, that shear force, through all these cylindrical surface where it applies. Okay, so you multiply it by this particular surface area to pi RL. Okay, and then you multiply by the shear force that is applied at that particular position at R equal R. It's very important that you don't use a wrong radius in here. You don't multiply it at the wrong position, because if you multiply it at R equals 0, meaning the force that is applied in the center line. But we are referring to the force that is applied on the tube. Okay, so that's very important, right? Once you get these things, then you can go back into your dV over dz. So you just basically these particular terms in here, except that you substitute the value of R equal R, right? You get that thing, you multiply that thing, then essentially what you get is this particular quantity. So the viscous force that is applied over the whole tube surface is basically counterbalanced by the net pressure force and the gravitational force. Right, I sometimes I ask myself again, why, how come for just a 4-page of this 4-page of PDF files, but I spend 1 hour to describe all of this. Then Frederick also may wonder, may be puzzled, how can Jaka goes just for explaining these 4 pages of this PDF is it took Jaka 1 hour, almost 1 hour to describe. That's because I'm going through the detail with you guys, so that you guys don't have any doubt on the transfer phenomena. So I have gone through all the details, through the small steps, to make you sure that you don't overlook anything in this sample. Okay, so I got nothing else again for today's drop-in session. I think for the next drop-in session, that will be on Wednesday next week, where I will discuss the next example, and then that will go a bit faster because I have gone in very detail with the first 2 examples, and you are in well position to go and tackle the assignment 1. And I would encourage everybody to start doing the assignment 1 as soon as possible. Don't try not to do it on the last week, because that will be troublesome. Okay, and then the question 2 and the question 3 itself is involving a long time as well. I have another meeting at 3 o'clock. So before I conclude these sessions, I would like to confirm with all of you if is there any questions. Alvin, any questions? Daniel, any questions? Evangeline, any questions? Gladys, Jonathan, Kusau, Saif, Sarena, Stephanie, Tiara. Look, I think that transfer phenomena is something that you don't want to underestimate. Okay, so if you have anything, and I told you again, there is no stupid questions. You have to ask. If you ask that particular questions only at the time nearing the assignment or the quiz, then that doesn't do help for yourself, because if you have now is pretty much the right time. Or probably if you want to ask at the 4th week is also good. If not, then I think I will just stop the recording and probably give you, I think, 5 minutes of break if you want, and then Frederick can start the recording again. I think then that will be good. And I think probably we set up a new meeting for this one as well, Frederick. We just I just stop recording, and then we all go out, and then you start again at 3 o'clock, because then that's the only way that we can segregate the attendance meeting. Okay, so that will be good after this. Otherwise, we will have basically, it will be difficult. It will be a combined section. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. So I will just stop this recording session in here, and then me and look, I will be approachable at any time to help you on the unit related things. Okay. So yes, Saif. Anything that you want to ask me? Tell me. Tomorrow questions is how many, Frederica? 15 if not wrong, huh? 15 if not wrong. 15 questions if not wrong. That will be along just a concepts, and then I think it's something that you will be able to answer if you understand the whole examples like what I'm asking in here. So I just want to make sure that everybody prepare well. That's why the online quiz is there to test your understanding on the examples and all the things that I give. So that will only cover the first 3 weeks of the materials basically. Okay. I hope that's clear. Then you can ask Frederick again during the tutorial session if you still have any question. But I wish you all the best, and I think that online quiz should not be that difficult. So as long as if you prepare yourself well, then you should be able to tackle that thing. Okay, just bear in mind whatever in the announcement that has been put. Then you want to take a note of those. Okay, thank you everybody, and see you again next week.